The cabin lights glowed a soft amber as passengers boarded Starcrest Air Flight 907, but as soon as Elias Ward, a sharply dressed black executive, in a tailored gray suit, stepped into first class, the atmosphere shifted with an almost imperceptible chill. He carried nothing but a leather briefcase and the quiet confidence of a man who'd fought for every inch of his success, yet the moment he reached seat 2A, his seat, two flight attendants exchanged glances that were anything but welcoming. "Sir," one of them said, her smile tight. "First-class boarding is limited to priority travelers." Elias handed over his boarding pass without hesitation. She looked at it, then looked at him, then looked again, as if the ink must have lied. "Are you sure this is yours?" she asked. Passengers in nearby rows slowed their movements, pretending to arrange luggage while clearly eavesdropping. Elias kept his voice even. "Yes. It's mine." But the attendant's eyes drifted over him, his skin, his face, his presence, and something in her expression hardened with baseless suspicion. "Where's the matching ID?" she demanded. Elias offered it calmly, but instead of apologizing, she turned to her colleague. "This doesn't look right. Should we check with security?" The second attendant nodded. "We've had incidents before. Rumors, the oldest tool of discrimination." Bystanders looked up now, some whispering, some smirking, as if watching a spectacle rather than a humiliation. Elias felt heat rise in his chest, a familiar burn he'd learned to control over decades of being questioned, doubted, underestimated. He spoke carefully. "Is there a reason you're treating me differently from every other passenger here?" The lead attendant crossed her arms, defensive. "Sir, we're just following procedure." But he had watched them greet every other traveler in first class with warm smiles and no extra steps. The lie hung in the air, thin and sharp. Then, as the attendant stepped back with his documents, as if preparing to summon security, Elias pulled out a black ID wallet embossed with a symbol only a handful of aviation professionals recognized. One glimpse at the badge made her face drain of color entirely. The embossed title read, Elias Ward, Executive Director, Starcrest Aviation Holdings. The tension snapped like a pulled wire. The second attendant leaned in, eyes widening as she registered the badge. "Sir? Mr. Ward, we didn't realize." But Elias didn't raise his voice. He simply said, "No. You didn't care to realize." The nearby passengers shifted uncomfortably. A businessman who had earlier smirked now pretended to scroll his phone. At that moment, the cabin manager hurried in, alerted by frantic whispers from crew members in the galley. "Mr. Ward," she said breathlessly, "please accept our apologies. There seems to have been a terrible misunderstanding." Elias closed his badge with a soft click. "A misunderstanding?" he repeated. "Or selective enforcement?" The words hit like an engine backfire. The manager swallowed. "Sir, we take concerns like this seriously, then you'll take immediate action," he said. "Because what happened here is not about policy. It's about perception. And perception is shaped by bias." His voice carried through the cabin, firm but steady, and several passengers lowered their eyes. The attendants who had challenged him stood frozen now, realizing the enormity of their mistake. The manager nodded rapidly. "Of course, sir. I'll handle this at once. The attendants will be removed from the flight and—" Elias raised a hand, stopping her. "Removing them won't fix the culture that created this behavior," he said. "I want names. I want a report. And I want training protocols reviewed company-wide." The manager blanched. "Yes, of course." The two attendants were quietly escorted off the aircraft, their stunned silence echoing beneath the murmurs of passengers. As they disappeared down the aisle, Elias turned toward the rest of the cabin, his voice lowering into something heavier, something tired. "Moments like this aren't rare," he said softly. "They're routine. And they shouldn't be." A woman in 3C whispered, "I'm so sorry this happened to you." Elias nodded politely but didn't smile. The plane felt different now, quieter, heavier, every passenger forced to confront the truth they'd witnessed. The cabin manager bowed her head. Your seat is ready, Mr. Ward. Anything you need, please let us know. But Elias didn't sit down yet. Slowly, deliberately, he turned and addressed the entire first-class cabin. For some of you, this was entertainment. For others, it was uncomfortable. For me, it was Tuesday. His words hung there like smoke, undeniable and unforgettable. When the replacement crew arrived, polite, professional, clearly briefed on the gravity of the situation, the energy in first class shifted. Elias finally took his seat in 2A, placing his briefcase under the seat with composed dignity, though the sting of the earlier confrontation still pulsed beneath his calm exterior. Across the aisle, a young boy looked at him with wide eyes. Sir, are you the boss of the plane? Elias softened. Something like that. The boy grinned. Then they should have listened to you from the start. Elias smiled faintly. They should listen to everyone with respect. The plane doors closed, but the air remained thick with reflection. The cabin manager returned once more, voice trembling with sincerity. Mr. Ward, corporate wants to issue a formal apology. They're preparing a statement. But Elias shook his head. I'm not interested in statements. I'm interested in change. She swallowed. Understood. As the engines roared to life, Elias looked out the window, his reflection staring back at him, a man who had reached the top of his field and yet still found himself confronted by the same barriers he'd fought since childhood. But today felt different. Today, he had not only defended himself, he had exposed something the entire plane could no longer deny. And as the aircraft began its ascent, a quiet resolve tightened in his chest. This incident would not vanish into a file. It would reshape training, policies, and expectations across Starcrest Air. Not out of vengeance, but responsibility. The boy across the aisle whispered to his mother. He changed everything. And as the plane climbed higher, the truth settled like sunlight across Elias's seat. Yes. This time he had. If this story made you feel something, anger, recognition, reflection, or resolve, then don't leave this page without adding your voice. Write a comment right now about the moment that struck you hardest. Was it when Elias was questioned for no reason? When the passengers watched silently? Or when he finally revealed the truth and shifted the entire power structure in one breath? Your reaction matters because stories like this mirror real experiences, moments people face in airports, offices, classrooms, and everyday life. By speaking up in the comments, you aren't just engaging with a video, you're helping shine a light on the patterns that too often remain hidden. Share this story with someone who needs to understand how bias can disguise itself as procedure or protocol. And if you believe in storytelling that calls out injustice, uplifts strength, and challenges the systems that allow discrimination to thrive, make sure you subscribe before you scroll away. Your support helps these stories reach more people. People who might see their own experiences reflected, or people who might finally understand experiences they've never had to face. Every comment, like, and share builds a community that refuses to look away from hard truths. So take a moment. Use your voice. And remember, silence lets injustice breathe, but attention suffocates it. Let's keep telling the stories that matter. Let's keep creating change, together.